Welcome back. I'm Bill. Today I've got a Preway P4522 stove. This was made by the Prentice Webers Products Corporation. It says here you can just barely make it out. They were located in Wisconsin Rapids, Wisconsin, and they started about 1915. They started out, it was two partners, one of whom got frustrated on a fishing trip that he couldn't find any dry wood for a fire and said we should make a camp stove. So they started out making camp stoves actually about five or 6 years or so before Coleman did, and sort of perfected their product, and then branched out in the 1920s into making other camping equipment, most notably in our circles, stoves and lanterns. And they made those through the 20s and 30s and the 40s. In the 50s, they started branching out and making other gas appliances like kitchen stoves, radiant heaters, water heaters, stuff like that. And they continued through the 50s, 60s, I think even into the 80s. My understanding from some articles I've read is they branched out too much. They got into making gas grills and things like that and just overextended themselves and tanked. There's not a lot of information on this particular model on the internet. From the research I've been able to do, the P4522 was made between 1945 and 1947, so right after the war. There was also a P4523, which was identical but had 3 burners, so it's the same thing, just stretched a bit. After this, they made a 4522A and a 4523A. I'm not sure exactly what the differences are. This came with some photocopied instructions that are from the P4522A. And as far as I can tell, it looks pretty much the same. Now, I'm going to do a complete restoration on this. I think at some point this was someone's daily driver, if you will, for when they went camping. They've, I think, taken care of it, but not in a collector way. It's been completely repainted, and you can especially tell around here, either they painted over the rust or they may have even painted over some of the grease that was on it. You can just barely make out the stamping on here because of that. I think the tank is original, but there's some spots on here that looks like the paint was brushed on, which maybe they did that in the factory, I don't know. But there's overspray. This top grate surround should be black, and there's overspray across the back and the front here, and they didn't even take out the burner assembly, and there's overspray in the back here. So I'd like to make that look a lot nicer. As far as the color goes, I think this is probably, maybe it's a John Deere green. It might be someone's version of Hunter green, but it's a little too light for that, I think. I'll try to show you when I've got this turned around as we're taking it apart. I've used some acetone and rubbed off the aftermarket paint and exposed some of the original on the side and also on the bottom. And I'm seeing what looks kind of almost like a Coleman green, maybe a little bit more olive than that. So I'll see what I can do to match it, but I have a feeling we're going to end up going with Hunter green. Looking on the internet at pictures of these, they seem to range anywhere from sort of that Hunter green or olive drab up to more like a John Deere green, which is what this kind of looks like. But this is definitely the darker shade. So I think that's it, and I will reposition you and we'll start taking this apart. All right. So open this up. This is the one thing that I actually like this stove, and I've used it a couple times and it runs beautifully. I love everything about it. The only thing that's a little bit goofy is these windscreen retainers, unless I'm doing something wrong with them, but every picture I've seen they're positioned the same way. They just go through these holes, and of course if you put any weight or if the wind catches this, it just pulls it right off. So if you know a better way to use these, go ahead and put it in the comments. Also, if you know anything more about these in terms of the date or anything like that, feel free to comment as well. So let's take the stove tank off, and we'll come back to that later. Again, it works. The one thing that I would like to do is take the check valve out. I have, like I said, I've used this and had no problems with pressure. I've dunk tested it. This has a lead seal on the fuel cap, and that is working perfectly. This has a non-return valve with a pip in the bottom of it, as opposed to a check valve like a Coleman stove, and it's working fine. I would really like to get it out just to inspect it further and possibly replace the pip, because when I dunk tested this, actually all I had to do was pour some water into the tube, and you could watch every couple of minutes a little tiny bubble rises up, and I'd like to see if I could improve on that. But like I said, it doesn't lose appreciable or noticeable pressure even when it's being used for an extended period. So in terms of that, it's fine. The problem is this check valve is simply slotted. I could put a big screwdriver in there, and I've actually already tried this, and it doesn't want to budge. And since it's brass, I don't want to destroy it. So discretion being the better part of valor, I'm just going to leave it like it is with the check valve, because it's working fine. The leak that's happening is not worth dealing with at this point, and we'll just hope it doesn't get any worse. So we'll set the stove tank aside. Now, this is an interesting design. I've never seen anything like it before, but our manifold, you can see, if I tilt this, we've got a cast iron manifold or burner assembly in here, and it simply pull on it, and it just comes out like that. It is held in place. There's one tab back here that slots into this, and then we've got these sheet metal tabs that hold it in place. So this, for the auxiliary burner, simply moves up and down. The action at present isn't very smooth, and I think it's because this pin is probably rusty, so hopefully we can fix some of that as we work on this. So let's go ahead and take this apart. I've had, since I last used this, I put some deep creep on it, on these screws on the bottom side, and let them sit for a while, so hopefully they'll come out. This obviously is not an original screw here. That's a Phillips head screw. Figured that one would come out easily. These others. The fact that there's a Phillips screw head in there tells me that at some point someone took this apart. Show you when this is all done. These burners do have a neat flame pattern. Okay, those came out very easily, whether it's because probably a combination of someone else having taken them apart not too terribly long ago, and the deep creep. So these have an asbestos gasket on them. There's that guy. And this is in much better shape. So you can see the shutoff, or the control for this, just works like that. And we'll take it out here in a second. I'd like to get that polished up and cleaned up so that it works more smoothly. This is all held together with this nut and a spring. And I wonder if I'm going to have to put a screw hold that. this the way. Oh, lots of penetrating oil on there. Let's see. I need to disengage this. There we go. This is normally why I wear gloves. Didn't even think about it today. So, and this isn't going anywhere. And there is our shutter. So that moves nice and smooth. So that tells me the grinding and all that is in the control mechanism. So we'll take care of that. So that is, as the rest of this is all crimped together. I don't want to mess with that any further. Let's take this guy apart. I think the place to start is with the grate. Now, these just wrap around. It's a piece of metal, and you can see I've already actually experimented with this side a little bit. So I just pried it apart with a screwdriver. See there. So I will just do the same on this side. One thing that's helpful in these cases, and this goes for the Coleman, the 444s and the 446s when you're taking the clips out that hold the grate on, if you put a mirror down underneath where you're working, you can actually see what's happening. And it makes things much easier. Getting there. Let's see if I can rotate this now. A bit more, I think, in this case. There we go. Okay. Now these, if I can get one side off, I can release the grates. Actually, that side's tighter, so let's do this side. We still have to do a little bit of bending there. Alright, got our grates off. And this guy should be painted black. Now for the lid, is held on with these hinges, and they're just pinned. So, let's see which side. One side has a head on it, the other side doesn't. They both come out that way. So for this, I'm simply going to take a punch, put it on top there, and that's coming out really easily. And this nail should be the right diameter. There's our little pin. And this looks like it comes out the same direction. comes right off. Now let's put that over here. To make this easier to strip and to paint, I'm going to take the windscreens off. And don't need to bend these up too far. I do need to bend them a little bit. Hopefully they will bend. More. There's one. Let's see if that's far enough. Almost. Bend these back just a little bit more to get it all put together, but that's good enough for now. And that's that, because the rest of this is all spot welded together. It's got legs. It's got these springs here that hold them in place, which I like, and the legs fold over and hold the lid closed. But these are riveted on, and I do not have the tools or the expertise to be replacing rivets. So these will be a little bit of a pain to paint. We'll just have to paint, then move it, let it dry, move it, paint it again. Yeah, that's as much as this is going to come apart. You can see some of that original paint color here, and you can also see some of that original paint color here. Like I say, it's almost an old Coleman green, maybe slightly more olive, I'm not sure. But that's the bottom half of the case. I'll just set that aside. And now the tank. So let's try to get this generator off first. Just gonna grab it here and see if it'll turn. Larger pliers here. There we go. Maybe before we go any further, I'll remove this gas tip while these are still easy to hold. I cannot tell you how this generator compares to a Coleman generator. I might have to put it next to a 425 or 421 4M type generator just to see how they compare, because it kind of looks like it's about the same size and length. And if that were the case, that would be handy. I'd replace it with one of those. This would explain why the stove runs well. That is a very clean generator and spring. this does have some fuel in it. It won't all dump out the end. There's a bit of a, I don't know if there's actually a baffle in here or what, but I guess I need to let some pressure out. There we go. It's leaking just a little bit. So this is pretty much just like a Coleman at this point. So it shouldn't be surprising, but we'll just unscrew this. Yeah, that's our cleaning rod. And our main valve. Now this is the Prentice Weber's equivalent of the air control on a Coleman. Does exactly the same thing. You turn it, I think about one turn, and that allows air to rush in through the valve, and that prevents the stove from flooding before the generator's hot. And it should be, I haven't taken one of these apart before, but it should be just another little valve of its own. And on the bottom of the valve here, I expect we will see let's see here. On the bottom of this valve, I expect we'll see a little air inlet, just like on the AGM valves. Okay, yep. This little hole here is where the air comes in, as opposed to Coleman, which has the fuel and air tube, and air rushes in the top and down and back up. This has a little hole here that allows air from the top of the tank to flood in there. So, unscrew our fuel pickup, and I'm going to take that off to get the there's a screen on the bottom of this. I want to make sure that's clean. So fuel pickup, making note the long end goes into the valve, the short end goes into the actual pickup tip, and that's our valve. Now, the pump. This is interesting because Coleman didn't use a spring clip like this until probably, what, 10 years later or so? I'm not sure why it's got this little deal on it, unless it's to hold it and pull it out. I don't know. But we've got our pump. The pump works great. Someone's kept it nice and oiled. Like I said, I think this was someone's daily driver until pretty recently. Washer in there, a little cylinder that keeps the pump leather centered, a backing plate, and then our spring and our cap. And notice this doesn't have, you don't have to line this up with the holes to get that spring clip in. It's just got a groove around there that fits into. Some of the early Coleman ones were like that. And there's our pump handle, and that is everything except the check valve down there. It's working all right, so I'm just going to leave it alone because I've already tried, and I've put as much torque on there as I'm comfortable with a screwdriver, and grabbing the screwdriver with large channel locks and trying to turn it, and it doesn't want to budge. So if I go any further and it doesn't budge, it's going to slip and I'll chew it up, and yeah, I don't want to do that. So there we go. So the next step is to get this guy into the electrolysis tank and get the paint and the rust off. So I will see you there. Bottom half of the stove tank is in the electrolysis tank, If you want to know more about that, I've got a video. I'll post a link up here. This is just a really easy way to strip paint and remove rust. It takes patience. It takes time, probably at least 24 hours before this is done, and you might have to take it out in the middle and scrub off that outer layer of paint with the wire brush, but it's a lot easier and less hassle than using paint stripper or anything else. But you just need patience, so I'll put this in and do other things while we wait for this. It'll start bubbling away in a while here. So this has been, I'm going to say, about 27 hours. I was going to take it out earlier and take care of the green paint that's on here, and things just got busy today and I had work to do, and that's okay. Electrolysis, you can't leave it in too long, and the longer you leave it in, the better your results will probably be. It may not look like much. You can see there's some paint flaking off here, but I'll show you what it's done. Let's take my fingernail and run it along there, and the paint just comes right off. I also did that down here on the bottom. I don't know if you can see that or not, but the paint just comes right off. So I'm going to take this out, hose it off, and with a pressure nozzle, and I might have to do a little bit of scrubbing on it, and we'll see what it looks like. Well, actually, since I took this out of the E-tank, you can see the paint really has blistered up. Once it's out of the water, it looks more dramatic. So I thought I'd film this. I'll try to film it with the hose and blasting it off just to give you an idea. That gives you an idea of how this goes. It's not always this easy. Usually the factory coat of paint doesn't quite come off quite that well, but this may be just because I left it in the E-tank longer than usual. But I will finish this up and throw some of the other components in there, and I'll see you when we're done. Here's our lower half of the stove body. See, that's after the electrolysis tank, hosing it down, and I did do a scrub down briefly with wire brush in some places, but most of it just with a green Scotch-Brite pad, and that took off most of the gunk. There's still a little bit of paint down in the corner here. I think whatever they sprayed on there went on a little thick there. There were a couple other spots. Those came off with wire brush. But for the most part, this is all clean. It will need to be sanded inside and out just to get everything smooth and prepped for painting. But that's the end of the electrolysis. On to the sanding. So it's not bad, but it is fairly rough. So I'm going to start with some 150 grit, and on this flat surface, I'm going to use it on a sanding block. On the inside, to get into the corners and all of that, I have to start doing it by hand. And I will probably use a wire wheel around this lettering to get it cleared out, and some of these other spots. But for the most part, 150 grit, and I'll see how it goes. Because I'm putting primer on, and this primer that I use is pretty good at filling the scratches. Usually I don't need to go any finer than 150 grit, but we'll see. Sometimes I do the 150, and then when I'm done, I go over it with some 400 just to smooth it out. But I'm thinking that 150 is probably going to get the job done just fine. So. So that is going pretty quickly, quite a bit faster than I thought. Wipe that off to see, and that's already feeling pretty good. So, well, the outside is done. This is the hardest piece of all of them to do, and the easiest part of it is done. So now I have to start on the inside, and these are the least fun. I love restoring stoves, but this is the least fun part, just because it's so difficult to get into all these places. But I will start with the sanding block, and then I'll have to move on and use some folded up sandpaper to do the more cramped areas. But even just that little bit, that does work. So I'll see you in a bit. All right, I think I'm almost there. I've been over the inside twice over now. Sanded it with the sandpaper, and then I wiped it down with a, well, it's not really a tack cloth, microfiber rag that grabs the dust with some acetone on it. And just kind of run my hands around. It was actually, the whole inside was covered in sort of this really light layer of surface rust, but it wasn't that big of a deal. It just came right off. But running my hands around now, this corner, there's a little bit of more sanding that needs to be done. A little bit here, and other than that, tiny bit here. So basically, I still need to get down in these corners, and after that, I think we'll be done. All right, time to paint this burner surround. I'm going to be using some VHT flame-proof header paint, starting with the primer, and then we'll go to the gloss black. This we spray on, and then once it's dried, it requires curing in the oven so that it's properly cured and can handle the heat. But 2 light coats, 1 medium coat, flip it over, do the same thing. Now for the top side. For the tank and for the main stove body, I'm going to be using this primer underneath some Duplicolor leaf green. I'm not worried about heat on these things like I am on the burner surround. So I'll get to work on this. Time for a second coat. All right, the primer is dry, so the next step here, I'm taking some 1000 grit sandpaper. You could do this with steel wool, although I prefer the wet sanding. I'll use steel wool around here. Just some fine sandpaper, anywhere from 600 to 1000 grit should be fine. And just gonna wet sand everything. See right, that corner got a little hot when I was baking this to cure the paint. I'm trying to speed it up a bit because there's so many pieces to this stove. Just running my hand over it. There's some spots here where it's not perfect. Those are where the spot welds are for the windscreen flaps or hinges, retainers, whatever you want to call those. Time for our color coat. I'm using this Duplicolor Leaf Green. This is the closest match I've been able to find, short of having custom rattle cans mixed up, and that isn't an option because no one around here will do that. I'd have to go over to Vancouver, and it'd cost me a couple $100 for 4 cans, and I probably need 1.5. So I'm going to go with this Leaf Green. It's got the olive tone of the original. It's a little bit darker, but apart from the darkness, it's pretty darn close, so I think we'll be happy with it. Duplicolor paint calls for 2 light coats and then 1 medium coat. All right, that's our first light coat, and we'll let it dry for about 10 minutes and then we'll go for the next. All right, let's put a second coat on here. Right, for the tank I'm using this Rust-Oleum copper metallic. I think the tube inside this can has fallen off because it won't spray it upright. It only sprays upside down, so don't do what I do. I'm just doing this because it's the only way to get anything out of this can. Here's after our color coat. I'm not really a happy camper. It took 3 cans of green paint, the Duplicolor leaf green. The first 2 cans were great. They went on like glass, and the 3rd can was a complete disaster. It did have a different lot number on it than the other 2, but the color wasn't consistent. In fact, you can see down in here the color's a bit blotchy, where I was spraying one color on top of the other, and couldn't tell until it was dry and things were lighter. Also, the 3rd can went on with a totally different texture. It's not quite so bad here, but especially on the lid and on the back side of the lid, it's blotchy and it's like a matte finish. It's actually rough. And when I run my fingers over it, I'm actually picking up some like paint dust. So I don't know what was wrong with that can. I don't know why it did that. I've never had that problem with Duplicolor before. My first thought, what I would probably normally do to solve this problem, would be to sand it with ever finer grits of sandpaper and polish it to a nice shine. The problem is these aren't like car panels where everything's nice and smooth and there aren't any sharp edges or anything. You've got some sharp edges, you've got spots with spot welds on them around here. If I sand this, you've things here as well. If you start sanding it, you're going to sand the paint off all those high spots that are in the metal around the edge. Things aren't shaped perfectly smooth when they shape the metal. So that's not really an option. I just end up having to spray it with another color coat, and I'd rather not do that. So what I'm going to do is very lightly sand this just to smooth it up a little bit, and then I'm going to spray it with clear coat. I wasn't really going for that really shiny look, but I think that's the best way to proceed from here. On the inside, the blotchiness, I've used all 3 cans. I'm out. I'm not going to spend money on another one. The Duplicolor paint is more expensive. So it's just going to be blotchy inside, unfortunately. But at least on this stove, you've got that burner surround that covers it, so you can't really see down inside anyways. So get to work sanding a bit. If you can see that this is probably the worst or the most obvious because we've got one big surface. I'm going to sand with some 1000 grit and do it very carefully. All right, I think that will be good. So that gives you an idea of what I'm going to do here. Now on to the larger, more difficult pieces. All right, hadn't planned on doing this, but it's clear coat time. I'm using some Rust-Oleum clear coat because I've got experience with this and never had any troubles with it. And I'm tired of troubles with paint, and it's always been easy to use. So let's get started. I've masked off the interior of the stove just because I don't want to clear coat that, but just the outside. Here I've got all of my parts in citric acid. In the left I've got the brass, on the right I've got the steel. It looks like that auxiliary control valve may have a brass stem on it, but other than that I think everything else in there is steel. This is a citric acid solution. This is what I'm using. I get it at a local beer and wine making supply house. I put in about a teaspoon per liter of water. There's nothing particularly magic about the combination. I've just found that's about what works. You can make it milder, you can make it stronger. Just remember, it'll take longer if it's mild. It'll take less time if it's stronger. But if it's stronger, if it's too strong, you may do some damage if you leave things sit in it too long. So I find about a teaspoon per liter of water is just about right. I'll let these simmer away for an hour or two on the steel, especially those burners. The brass, probably about 30 minutes, and I will take everything out, rinse it with fresh water, and rub it down with steel wool to get the debris off. All right, we've got parts coming out of the citric acid. This is the valve body. One thing I'll say, I did not put the valve knobs and the packing nuts in the citric acid. They can go in citric acid for a little while. Sometimes I'll put a valve in there with the knobs and nuts tightened up in a small container with some mild citric acid solution. Everything sealed up just to break down some of the crud that's on these. These weren't too bad, so I just rubbed these down with steel wool. But if you were to put the whole thing in, or especially if you just put these in like this, and the citric acid or vinegar, whatever you use, ends up getting into the graphite packing, it'll lose its lubricating properties and the knobs will be harder to turn. They'll still seal, but the knobs will just be harder to turn. So avoid doing that. If you just put them in a separate container, again, all sealed up with some mild solution just to cut through stuff and get it broken down so you can clean it up easier, that's okay. But these I just cleaned with steel wool. So I'm going to use some 4/0 steel wool and start rubbing everything down, make sure it's rinsed well and the citric acid is gone. All right, we've got all of our parts out of the citric acid bath, cleaned up, rubbed down with steel wool. So I'm not going to polish everything here, but I'm going to polish things like the valve and the pump handle and the knobs and all of that. So we'll get to work here. I've got a cotton buffing wheel and I'm using some white polishing compound, which I'm almost out of. I can't find any more anywhere. There seems to be a shortage, but this should get through a couple of projects at any rate. So I'll get started. Let's put this back together. First things first, while my hands are clean, I've got a new decal here that's from Old Coleman Parts. No idea who makes them, but Old Coleman Parts sells them. I've I've made a little pencil mark here, which is the center line, so that I've got it centered. Looking on the internet at other Preway stoves with this model, they can be anywhere from down here to way up here, so I'm not too worried about where I position it this way, just that it's centered left to right. So I've got it soaking here in some water, and we'll see if it's ready. Not quite. Well, maybe we're almost there. I think that'll be good. While we wait for the decal to cure, let's work on our manifold. I have just put this in the E-tank to get the rust and the grease off, and I'm leaving it the way it is. We need to put the control for this auxiliary burner back together, so it just drops in like that. And then we've got the control arm, and a bolt, a nut, and a spring. So I need to hold this in place. When I flip it over, it'll just fall back out. And let's see, that it goes, this side goes down or up in this case. And this plate goes up against this plate, and they just ride like that. And we see it goes up and down much more smoothly. Of course, we need to get the hardware in here. So the screw is in from that side. And then on this side, we have the spring that holds these two pieces together with some tension, and the nut. That's good. So this was relatively snug, if you'll remember. Get a screwdriver in there. This is a little awkward. Let's go this way. I can't turn the screwdriver. There's not enough clearance for the screwdriver to turn, so I'm just using it to hold everything together. And there's not much clearance for putting pliers on the nut, or a wrench on the nut rather. We can do it this way again. I think that's about how it was. Let's check the action. That is nice and smooth. That's way better than it was before. And I don't see any sign that that nut is going to work loose as a result of that. So I think we're good. Now we just need to put the burner caps back on. Got 1 and 2. Again, basically on these, I've just made sure all the rust is off. I've scrubbed them down, and I've made sure the screen material is clear. And we've got 3 original screws and 1 not original screw. And we've got this gasket material. Now, someone put this replacement gasket on the auxiliary side, and we've got this original, I assume asbestos, for the other, and it kind of came apart in pieces, unfortunately. I'm going to swap them around. I actually hunted all over town. I went to fireplace shop, barbecue shop, gas appliance place, an RV place, and no one can even tell me what this stuff is called. I've tried to look on the internet, but I haven't found anything quite like it. This is clearly fiberglass, because I thought, well, I'll just replace the other side as well, or replace both sides, but I can't find anything like this, so I'm just going to put it back the way it was. I am going to put this, the newer fiberglass gasket, on the primary burner and the asbestos on the auxiliary. And yeah, the asbestos was leaking slightly. I'm hoping that we can sort of rotate it around and get a better seal than we had before. All right. Yep, that'll be good. So we just need to get our holes lined up. And that's the new screw. There we go. Now, I'm going to try flipping this over on the other side, see if that helps at all. All right, there is our burner assembly. Everything's working properly. Now, before we put that in, let's work on this. Got our grates here. And let's see, one side fit better one way than the other, I think, as I recall. Now we've got to pinch these back together. I'm not sure the best way to do that. Probably from this side. That worked. Thought those would be harder to pinch, but they're not. Okay. Okay. Now we need to put this back in the case. So set that aside here. Over. Got these little clips. This part, they go in like this, and this part hooks underneath the lip here. So we'll get those in first. And then once those are in, I think we can actually just rotate them back. There we go. And once that's in there, so we've got a space to slide this guy in. And then, all of that just rotates down and underneath. And it's pinched. Hopefully you can do it without damaging the paint on the clips. That was pretty easy. Well, at least it's the paint underneath, right? All right, there we've got our grate on. I think that got windscreen 1. Hopefully it'll just slide under there. And we'll need to push this down. Use this dowel. That looks perfect. And this guy just slides right under. And there we go. Perfect. All right, let's get these pins in. I've been fiddling with this and noticing that the hinges without the pins in don't want to line up without manipulating them a little bit. But once we do that, it went in pretty easily. Tap that one a little bit with a punch. Carefully. And that one's set already. Okay. Great. Now, sure how well you can see in there, but got this tab slides into here, and then this just fits into these clips. And when I got this stove, the burner or the manifold assembly was up here and the tank was back here. And it looked like this was designed so that the manifold would come out and that you had to store it that way, but I've learned that's not the case. So I thought maybe these should be bent over the top of this to lock it in there more permanently, but they don't have the clearance for that. So I'm not sure why they designed it that way. I mean, it's easy removal, but yeah, that's just how it is. So our burner control is working great. I can close it, it's gonna stay closed, push it down easily. Should have good control over that. So that part's great. If anybody has more experience with this model stove and knows how these things are supposed to work, I'd appreciate it. The instruction manual, the photo's too small and unclear to see how it's different. They've got this notch down here, which seems like it should go around this. And of course, if you push this down too hard, it all just collapses. Or sorry, if you push it back, it all just comes apart. So it seems like this should be grabbing down in there, but I don't see any way for that to happen. We'll set that aside for now. We'll put our tank together. I think this came out really well considering I had a paint can with a tube, the pickup tube fell off and was down in the bottom. So fuel cap in. Now this just has a lead gasket on it, but I did test this and it does hold pressure. There was an ever so slight leak from the non-return valve, but I can't get it out, and it still held plenty of pressure over several days. So whatever that leak is, it's absolutely tiny. So we've got our pump handle, our spring clip, we've got the cap that goes on, spring that goes inside, got a little backer plate here for the pump leather itself, this little cylinder that holds it in place, and our outer nut. You can get that threaded on. Alright, there's that. Now let's put some oil on it. Alright, this isn't bad. It was working before. It's not bone dry or anything, but it definitely can use oil. I'm using some 3-in-1 oil. At least the Coleman factory used Neat's Foot oil, which is great. But any oil will do as long as it's not vegetable based, because vegetable based oil will gum up. You don't want that. So just feed that down in there. And notice this has that groove, so we don't need to line it up with any holes. Just need to get it down in there, and then get our spring clip in on one side. On the other side, and we're good. Now, put the valve together. Got the valve itself. Got our pickup, the fuel control, the air control, and the generator parts. So let's put the air control in first. Nope, that's not right. Got it oriented the wrong way. This just shuts off and opens this little hole here. It's the same function as the little wire you turn up on a Coleman stove, where it says to turn it up and then let it heat up for 1 minute and then you turn it down. All it's doing is controlling the, oh, that's too tight. All it's doing is controlling the air. It's kind of like a choke so that it doesn't flood. It's still pretty tight. Right, and then the valve, I should show you before I take that apart. The cleaning needle is threaded on this end and it just threads into here. In fact, I'll go ahead and do that now. It's probably easier to screw it in now than trying to thread it in later. All the way in. good. And then the generator. Put the spring over. And then the gas tip. All right, now the fuel pickup. So I noted when I took this apart, there are shorter threads on the bottom and longer threads on the top. There's also a smaller orifice on the top. The longer threads and the smaller orifice go into the valve itself. And then this is our the actual pickup. It's got a screen on the bottom, which I've cleaned. And that's good. Now we're ready to put it into the tank itself. So this is a tapered thread and it's brass, so it should be self-sealing, but just to be on the safe side, I'm going to use some blue Permatex thread sealant. This is sort of the medium grade stuff that will seal it without making it difficult to remove at any point in the future. And just feed that down in there. There we go. Oh. And this one, didn't even think about that. This isn't going to thread on with the knob on. So take that off. Put that back on in a minute. I think that's maybe just a little bit off. I think that's good. And now we'll put our knob back on. And that's good. So I'm going to add some gasoline to this and I'll put it on the tank, and when I'm back we'll fire it up. Gas in the tank, I've pumped it up, so we will start lighting this by opening the air control about a turn. Our auxiliary burner is off, and go ahead and open this up so we can see better. Flame. And it should take 30 seconds to a minute for that to calm down once the generator's hot. It's starting. Close off the airflow. pretty good. You give it a little more pressure since heavy metal. When this is open, it bleeds air out of the, bleeds pressure out of the tank. So let's go ahead and light our secondary. That looks great. That's gorgeous. That looks great. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.